Government Pandemic Crimes,
Episode
Episode 2.
2. Welcome to Government Pandemic Crimes, episode number 2. So, last episode, Evie and I started talking about the things that we want to remind people about because of the term used by a writer in another article, another context, was the Church of Forgetting. Because why do people forget so fast in our country, the Philippines? Because
They're too busy surviving.
That's why, exactly. Because people are too busy surviving, they
They forget what happened.
the last abuse.
And you don't want to remember the bad things. Your
Yes.
mind likes to remember the good things.
Yes, and of course you're just too busy
Because
worrying
it's a
about
survival method.
worrying about where's your next meal coming and where's your next money coming so you can buy food. So today it'll be a shorter one compared to the last one. So I'll let Yvette start this off because we're calling this men crying and men
Grown
begging.
men cry.
Grown men crying and grown men begging. You start off.
Because I noticed it was only during the pandemic, the last 2 years, apart from the invasion of Ukraine, but only during the last 2 years that I noticed the most number of grown men shedding tears on national television. That was like normal, ordinary guys feeling helpless and powerless. And when they get interviewed, they start breaking down and crying. And I only noticed that during the pandemic. It's only happened more during the pandemic. That's why it's called
Grown men crying, grown men begging. And as a man, I would like to supplement to what Yvette said. The man is, especially in a very macho culture like the
where
Philippines.
when you cannot provide for your family,
Yes.
you feel useless.
Useless, no purpose.
Useless, especially for typical Pinoy men, that they feel the only thing they really should do well is provide. Diba?
So
For them, that's the ultimate thing.
one of the indelible images from the pandemic, if you recall, was the interview on the news. It was started with a taxi driver who was big, middle-aged guy. He was just completely breaking down. We will look for the video and provide it in the link in the description below. But I remember that image. It was when ABS-CBN was still on the air and other channels were interviewing that guy. He just broke down. He was saying, wala nang makain, wala nang pera, wala nang,
Yeah.
no more take home.
We're just reminding people of the insensitivity of the government when they declared Metro Manila, everybody had to stop using public transportation, and so even doctors had to walk and nurses had to find a way
Yeah.
to get to a hospital.
We'll
You
go
know.
into more detail with regards to the effects of that.
Basically, you cannot shut down Metro Manila's public transportation. It's not Davao.
Without giving it enough
It's not.
time
It's
to
not a
figure out.
small province. It's not a small town. It's several cities clustered together. You can't just say everybody can walk. It's not like a small place like, for example, Iloilo, where you can actually walk home.
Or Bacolod.
You can actually walk home from the city center.
Yeah, so we'll get more into those details when we really do a blow-by-blow about what happened when Duterte gave people 48 hours to get out of Dodge, to get out as the
Get out of town.
get out of town, as the marshal would say to the villain would say to the sheriff, you have 48 hours to get out of Dodge. In this case, you have 48 hours till we have the first major lockdown, which was March 15, 2020. Now, what we'll be talking about mostly is men begging, grown men crying and grown men begging.
Because it was so painful to watch. And I was very disturbed and annoyed by a peer, one of those alpha male childhood friends who nobody ever questioned or answered back to and didn't dare. One of your alpha male childhood friends who said in a group page, "Oh, buti pa yung mga stewardess na marunong maghanap ng ibang livelihood kasi nagbe-bake, Sabi ko, medyo mali ata yun. Kasi you can't compare the education level of a stewardess who's still middle class. So of course she has other ways of making money when she can't fly as compared to a driver who can't drive anymore.
Not just education level, but also resources and economic level.
Yeah, and she has a home. She won't get evicted.
At worst, maybe most stewardesses or flight attendants are middle class to upper middle class. Maybe there might be a few lower middle class.
They're normally
ones.
middle class. Yeah.
But obviously, people who are drivers, jeepney drivers, taxi drivers,
Siyempre,
public bus drivers,
baka hanggang high school lang yun at the
tricycles,
most.
or even grade school, and definitely the working poor. Like if they stop working, they go hungry, literally, like we just saw.
So I was like, the one regret I had from 2020 is that I didn't say anything to the alpha male, but I'm saying it now. You sound like a privileged, a privileged prick.
Yes, I would have to agree because
that really sounds elitist and privileged, and like you really don't care what other people go through.
Which is funny because he's not even from the elite background.
Ganun naman sila eh. They're not from the elite, but they think they're elite. But anyway.
They're not even from the super rich or the really rich, which of course is another story with Miss Katarambulo. But, so for today, we just read an article about two jeepney drivers who had to, literally, the first article, we're going to go over it a bit. So, it's a GMA News Online article. It's entitled Jeepney Drivers Beg for Help on Metro Manila's Roads Amid Pandemic by Ron Lopez, working for Agence France Press, French news service. It's published August 17, 2020 at about 5:28 in the morning. The first story is about a guy named Daniel Flores, a jeepney driver who is only 23 years old. He had a baby, he had a wife, and literally he's become pretty much a beggar because he hasn't picked up a passenger since March.
The article was August 17, 2020.
So do your math. That's
since March, wala siyang pera. So
poor guy.
Wala siyang jeepney
fares.
So since March, April, May, June, July, August, 6 months.
6 months. You would think people would have starved to death by that time, but but they're still okay. Yes, the government gave aid.
They were evicted from their apartment because they could no longer pay the rent.
Yes, the government gave aid, but that wasn't enough, obviously. That's not enough. You give, we can go into the numbers in another video talking about, if you do the math, how little, and I mean, the aid given by the government to the people in need is pretty much a token.
It's just to say that they did their job.
It's just say they did their job, and it's like, and in the first place, the whole mismanagement created a situation why this guy, Mr. Daniel Flores, was now begging in the streets as of August 2020. So a lot of jeepney drivers were doing that. I remember passing through Manila area around, I think also around somewhere in the middle of 2020, and yes, there were a lot of jeepney drivers along Taft who were begging. Because again, they could not drive because public transportation was not allowed because we're on lockdown.
Yeah, but only the office of the vice president provided dorms and they provided transportation for their doctors, nurses, and frontliners.
One of the few places, aside from the office of the vice president, there are also, and again, it depends which local government you were under. If your local government was okay,
like
Marikina or Pasig, for example, in Metro Manila, I'm not sure about the other parts of the Philippines, you'd be good. But if your local government was corrupt and incompetent, then you would be in big trouble.
Some people who were from Makati would go to Pateros or Pasig to do something they needed, like either get a shot or they would, that was 2021, they'd get a shot. But in 2020, what were they doing? But it was like people were going to another city to get something they needed because they couldn't get it in their city.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, there are certain cities that are really bad because the local government is really incompetent and corrupt and wasn't really helping their people. And even power tripping up to from the barangay level up.
The power tripping was, I remember the story of the barangay captain blocking a nurse from going to work, leaving her house and going to work because they had to lock down that section. And so if she was going to go to the hospital, of course she would, she couldn't come home. And she was getting mad about that. You know, she wasn't being allowed, and it's a nurse. She wasn't being
She's
allowed.
a frontline health worker.
She was a frontliner. I don't know what her beef, what the barangay captain's beef was with her, but they were going at each other about. I don't know what happened to that story, but I remember watching that.
One of many stories, hundreds or thousands of stories that happened during this pandemic. So, aside from Mr. Daniel Flores, the second story in this article is talking about the complete opposite spectrum of the age. So, Mr. Flores was in his 20s. The next person, of course, was 73 years old, Mr. Cecinando Bondo.
Started driving when he was 28.
And he had been driving a Jeep for more than 40 years, 45 years. Same issue.
Cracking his voice cracked as he fought back tears. We have to leave our homes and take our chances in the streets.
Yes.
Just to have something in our growling stomach.
And of course, take note, in the middle of a pandemic where you can get infected, and we still don't know and the vaccines haven't come yet.
That was 2020.
The vaccines have not come yet to this country at that point.
So they were out begging.
Out there begging, risking heat stroke, robbery, dying from the virus, dying from hunger or whatever, dehydration.
Wala. Remember the movie we saw, the Italian movie we saw where the old guy was forced to beg?
Yeah.
They show the process that it takes a while before you lower your pride and then you realize you're gonna beg already.
Yeah.
You have to be really hungry. So
this case it was, I think, a bit more accelerated. Compared to the film Umberto D, which is a neorealist film. This was real life neorealism. And also this article takes note. Ayon, it says here
55,000 jeepneys.
Yeah.
Were allowed to operate. When was that?
A fraction.
In June?
A fraction only. A fraction.
In June.
A fraction only.
After the summer.
Meaning not all. Not even all.
But then they had to install those stupid plastic seat dividers, which I don't even know if that worked.
Which I saw. I mean,
and people made fun of the plastic dividers of the motorcycle.
In Makati, it looked like some kind of movie where you'd see a jeepney and everyone was like covered in plastic. Everything is covered in plastic.
I think it was completely useless. I don't think you need that. You just need just like the face shields were completely useless according to some people. So all you needed was your mask.
Well, reading this article again, and this of course is factual, it's not made up. Drivers have received some money and food handouts from the government, but does not make up for their lost income. Obviously, the lost daily income.
Yeah.
If you earn, what, 500 a day?
They used to pocket 1.5 a day, sabi nila. 1.5 a day before the pandemic.
Yeah.
They would pocket 1.5 a day, which is pretty decent.
Pretty decent. That's a lot of hard work too, I know. And of course, the plastic seat dividers reduced more. I mean, gave more difficult, problems to them. Well, another driver was also noted here. Renato Gandas, 57, who had been a driver for 30 years, said the owner of his vehicle had already sold the jeepney due to the phasing out program. That's a different issue in the lockdown. So the phasing out, they're trying to force the jeepney drivers to adopt the electric.
They cannot change to e-jeepney in the middle of
a pandemic.
A crisis. You do that before or after, not during, which is what,
With his livelihood at risk, Gandas is losing hope. The last quote says...
That's what Roberto was saying. You can't force people to change during a pandemic.
And you can't force people just to change right away. That will be a gradual transition process.
E-jeepney? The e-jeepney. Kung kailan pa gagawin yun? Kung kailan wala nga silang panggastos.
We might just beg for alms for the rest of our lives, said Renato Gandas, 57 years old. Let's go to the government response.
The government response, the article where they said it could have been worse.
It could have been worse, says Pals and record high adult joblessness.
This is from August 17, 2020.
Yes, it's by Arian Meres, ABS-CBN News.
Probably doesn't have a job now either.
Probably doesn't have a job now either because ABS was closed down. So, unsurprising, let's paraphrase a bit.
27 million were
jobless, according to SWS,
in
National
July
Mobile Phone Survey last July 2020. 45.5% adult joblessness rate.
Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque, at
Yes.
the time, who's now running for
Senator,
senator,
presidential spokesperson Harry Roque.
said the results of the poll could have been worse. It could have been worse. Ako po'y nagagalak na hindi tayo 100% nawala ng trabaho kasi sa tagal po ng naka-lockdown tayo, talagang I'm still surprised that our resilience at 45% pa lang po ang nawawala ng trabaho. Sorry, I can't copy the jowls moving.
I don't know if I want to laugh or I want to just curse, but it's like...
I'm glad that not everyone lost their jobs.
Because of the long lockdown. That's the translation. But he would have said, it would have been worse kasi nga po,
It
complete
could have been
lockdown.
worse. What? You want, meaning Afghanistan and what, Sri Lanka?
What, you want 100% jobless? For you to move your
Actually,
to your job?
Hindi sila gagalaw unless ganun ka.
This is a quote from Harry Roque at this point.
So it was record 45.5%.
27.3 million unemployed.
That's half the adult population.
That took, what, just a few months or several months to happen. And so on and so forth.
Anyway.
And let's look at it some more. Roque continues to say, I think government is looking at opening the economy and providing financial assistance to small and medium-scale enterprises. Also assistance to strategic businesses, even if it's not small and medium-scale. So anyway, talk about kicking people when they're down or saying insensitive things when people are down.
A lot of people would say insensitive things, and then there were people who were more sensitive. Like, there was a time one of the artists said, don't post food pics.
Yeah.
Especially if your Instagram is public or if your Facebook is public.
Yeah.
Make it private na lang for your friends. If you're going to post food pictures during this time, it's kind of insensitive to those who don't have food.
Yeah.
And then, from the same group, I noticed they were posting food pictures. I won't say who. Anyway, another group. Not the artist, obviously.
At least he was sensitive, unlike the other person you mentioned. And
yeah.
Mr.
The insensitive group, of course they kept posting their food and whatever.
And Mr. Presidential spokesperson.
I mean, unless you're selling it. Sabi niya, the artist said, unless you're selling...
To make money.
Unless you're selling it as a business, fine, post the food. But if you're just showing food that you ate, don't. Unless you're selling it lang. You know. Because it's kind of insensitive. Diba?
Well, there you go. So, that was just the first few months in 2020.
Mm-hmm. Which were the worst because nobody knew what to do yet.
Because nobody really actually wanted to do anything properly.
No, they took advantage of it nga. Their priority was, instead of vaccination, was closing down television station and radio station.
Going after their enemies.
Yeah, that's the priority ng 2020. Not 2021, later na yung vaccination.
Yeah. And of course, we'd have to confirm reports about they could have ordered those things earlier.
Yes, they could have. And
we have to confirm those reports, though.
We knew things were happening already abroad because we have friends abroad. So we could see that they were getting vaccinated already. I mean, there's social media. So you can see already who's ahead and who is getting what. Diba?
Which made it worse because it was like a vaccine, apartheid and vaccine.
Yeah, the third world countries or the Asians would get it last, and the Americans and UK people or Canadian-based people were already showing off their mandates.
Which was also probably insensitive on their part.
Insensitive on their part if they're American to show that to their friends who are not, who are in third world countries. They didn't think that was insensitive.
Not just Asia. Africa was the last, I think. It was one of the last two.
There were things like I unfriended one person who was living in Thailand, but I had met her in another international sort of thing before. And then I found it insensitive that she was still skydiving or doing things like that. And that was already the pandemic. It's like, don't you see that? I mean, you're in Thailand, so you would know, right? You would
tourist
know
bubble.
tourist bubble. I think she was
Tourist
in a
bubble.
tourist bubble.
Tourist bubble.
So I found that really insensitive that she was still doing those things.
Well, can't control
So
people.
I took
babe.
her out.
But I guess the biggest thing we're talking about here is the yun nga. Yes, no one had seen anything like this in the last 100 years, but there were protocols, I'm sure, or there were plans. I mean,
Yeah, everybody was guessing what to do, but some people guessed it better than others. Like Pasig did it better, and Marikina did it better, and Office of the Vice President did it better. You know, it was like depende kung how dedicated you are to service, I suppose.
a lot of it was common sense. Actually,
It's all common sense because everything you manage or problem solving, crisis solving is always common sense.
And don't forget that once we get to the part about the 48 hours, then the lockdown, they had more than a month to prepare. Let's remind everyone.
We already said that in the first episode.
One. They had more than a month to prepare. So, if you are planning to lock down in the first place, but of course they didn't prepare because they kept downplaying it and all the statements from Malacanang and also some other government officials.
They were more concerned about
China letting the tourists in.
They were more concerned about using test kits from China instead of UP test kits. I remember that. Yeah, but that's another one. That's another
one
topic.
altogether. So the point is, you got more than a month to prepare. So if you're really gonna have to lock down, even just for a few months, you already have your plan together. And of course, there was no plan. There was no plan.
But no, it could have been worse.
It could have been worse, according to Roque. It could have been worse. It could have been worse. We can't, even if I puff my chin out,
Try to be like
I can't, my face won't be as fat as his if I puff my chin out.
Anyway, sige. Ayun. It's already
I have
20
no more wine,
minutes.
so no cheers to the government, but sorry for the jeepney drivers and those guys. And I hope they're better now.
But I think 2021, I think naayos nila. It took a long time.
But they were still screwing up. There were some things we can still go back to 2021 that still kept repeating. Of course, the constant lockdowns kept repeating.
Yeah, and there might be another one.
Might be another one soon.
You know, like how convenient it is that, like in New York, they suddenly have a surge or something at the consulate where they're supposed to vote or mail in the ballots. Just find it a little convenient. Anyway,
So this is episode 2 of government pandemic crimes. We're just reminding people.
But the numbers now are 154.
Yeah.
That's for the whole Philippines. So that's the lowest it's ever been.
Yeah.
That's the lowest it's ever been as of today.
The lowest since the early parts of the pandemic when they were still single digits. The lowest is the first part.
Yeah, it's like before it was like only one person per island or something.
But remember what happened with Omicron? They just suddenly jumped to 2,000, 3,000 in a few days. And then suddenly
Yeah,
it was
well, that's because they allowed Chinese tourists in, remember?
Also Phil-Am tourists. Sorry, Phil-Ams. But a lot of you are in a country where you don't wear masks.
Or you don't want to wear masks. Or a lot of Americans don't want to wear masks, and I don't know why.
We know why, but there's no logic behind it. Because my freedom. Anyway, that's it for this episode. We'll see you for episode 3. We'll decide which one we'll talk about.